On November the 25th, 1177, a dying 16-year-old boy with bandaged hands and 500 knights faced down 26,000 of Islam's finest warriors. By sunset, the most powerful Muslim army in the world lay shattered, and history's most unlikely military genius had written his legend in blood. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, let's ease into today's history journey together. Think about those numbers for a second. 500 against 26,000. That is a 52-to-1 disadvantage. The fate of Christian civilization in the Holy Land hung by a thread so thin it was invisible. Yet by the end of this story, you will understand how a 16-year-old boy achieved the impossible. Why Saladin, the greatest Muslim commander of the age, made the fatal error that cost him everything, and what really happened in those savage moments when faith collided with steel. I am about to reveal 3 things that will change how you see medieval warfare forever. First, the secret terrain feature that turns certain death into total victory. Second, why Saladin's elite bodyguard abandoned their legendary leader on racing camels. And third, the tactical signal Baldwin gave that made 500 men believe they could destroy 26,000. But here is what makes this story truly unbelievable. How did Baldwin even hold a sword with advanced leprosy eating away his flesh? What mistake did Saladin make that no historian saw coming? Why did Muslim chroniclers themselves call this battle divine punishment? How could seasoned Mamluk cavalry warriors who had never known defeat break before teenage knights? How could 90% of an army simply vanish in one afternoon? This is the story of the masked king who could not feel pain versus the sultan who had never known defeat. To understand how 500 men destroyed an empire's might, we need to step back 3 days to when Jerusalem itself was preparing for the end. The year 1177 marked the darkest hour for the Crusader kingdoms. For 80 years, Christian knights had clung to their precarious footholds in the Holy Land. But now the tide was turning, and turning fast. Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, had accomplished what seemed impossible. He united the fractured Muslim world under one banner, forging an empire that stretched from the Nile to the Euphrates. His name alone emptied castles. His reputation preceded his armies like a plague. At 40 years old, he commanded over 100,000 warriors and possessed the wealth of Egypt to fund endless campaigns. He was not just a military genius. He was a force of history itself, inevitable as sunrise. Facing this titan stood Baldwin IV. Crowned at 13, he carried a curse that should have killed him years ago. Leprosy, the disease medieval minds saw as God's own judgment. By 16, his body was failing. His hands, wrapped in silk bandages, could barely grip a sword. His face, hidden behind a silver mask, concealed features ravaged by disease. Courtiers whispered he was cursed by God. Yet impossibly, he ruled with a clarity that stunned friend and foe alike. Inside Jerusalem's War Council chamber on November the 23rd, Baldwin lay on his litter as advisors delivered the death sentence. Saladin was assembling 26,000 mounted warriors. The city's garrison numbered less than 1,000 men. Baldwin could scrape together perhaps 500 knights if he stripped every castle bare. "Sire, we should negotiate surrender," the Templar Grand Master Odo of St. Amand urged. "Save the Christian population from slaughter." Silence filled the chamber like water filling a tomb. Then Baldwin spoke, his voice muffled by the mask but carrying impossible strength. "Bring me my armor." The council erupted. "You cannot ride. This is madness. 500 cannot defeat 26,000. Baldwin struggled upright, tremors racking his wasted frame. "Saladin thinks we will cower behind walls. He thinks a dying boy cannot lead armies. He thinks numbers guarantee victory." His voice cut through the protests. "He is wrong. We march tonight. 45 miles to catch his army scattered and unprepared. We strike at dawn, and we teach Saladin that faith counts more than numbers." What he proposed was not warfare. It was calculated insanity. Yet in that moment, 500 knights began to believe the impossible. November the 24th became a forced march that defied human endurance. 45 miles in 36 hours, an insane pace for healthy men, absolute torture for a king whose body was literally falling apart. Baldwin, carried on his litter when consciousness fled from pain, refused to slow the column. Templars took turns bearing their dying king through the darkness, praying he would survive to see battle. The night march was hell itself. Knights swayed in their saddles, half asleep, trusting their horses to follow the man ahead. The November cold bit through armor. Men's breath misted in the darkness. Behind them, 3,000 infantry struggled to keep pace, their feet bleeding, their lungs burning. Some collapsed and were left behind. There was no time for mercy, no time for weakness. Only the destination mattered. Baldwin drifted in and out of consciousness, his body rebelling against the punishment. Each jolt of the litter sent fresh waves of agony through his diseased frame. His attendants whispered prayers, certain their king would die before seeing battle. But each time they checked, those eyes behind the silver mask remained open, alert, calculating. By dawn on November the 25th, scouts brought electrifying news. Saladin's massive host was spread across 3 miles of countryside near Montgisard, scattered in foraging parties, their guard completely down. The enemy had no idea Christian knights were within 50 miles. The Sultan's confidence had bred fatal carelessness. But then the full scope of their task became clear. The scouts had underestimated not 20,000 warriors camped ahead, but 26,000. Their banners blackened the horizon like a storm front. The supply train alone stretched for miles, evidence of Saladin's absolute certainty of conquest. The mathematical reality crushed morale instantly. 52 enemies for every Christian knight. Baldwin, finally lifted onto his horse despite hands so damaged he needed help gripping the reins, saw despair spreading through his ranks. Knights openly wept. Others began mumbling prayers for the dead, their own deaths. Horses sensed their riders' fear and stamped nervously. The Templar Grandmaster Odo of Saint Amand rode close, his scarred face grave. "Sire, even with surprise, the numbers are impossible. We should withdraw, live to fight another day." Then Baldwin did something no one expected. Despite agony that would have killed most men, he removed his silver mask. Let them see his ravaged face, the disease eating away his flesh, the open sores that wept constantly, the boy who should not be alive, much less leading armies into hell itself. "Look at me," his voice rang clear across 500 mounted men. The assembled knights stared at their king's ruined features, many seeing them for the first time. "God gave me this disease so that when we achieve victory, no man can claim it was by human strength alone." David faced Goliath with faith. We faced 26,000 with God. The effect was electric. If this dying boy, this living corpse, could find courage to charge into certain death, what excuse did healthy men have for fear? At 11 o'clock in the morning, Saladin received his first warning. Dust clouds to the north moving fast. His initial reaction was laughter. Intelligence reports confirmed Baldwin was in Jerusalem, probably cowering behind those ancient walls. This had to be a scouting party, nothing more. Perhaps local bandits. His officers shared the amusement. This overconfidence would cost them everything. By noon, the truth became undeniable. Crusader banners appeared on the ridgeline, the blood-red cross of the Templars, the golden crosses of Jerusalem, the true cross itself, carried by the Bishop of Bethlehem, gleaming in the midday sun. Saladin's scattered forces began frantically trying to reform battle lines. Officers screamed orders. Drummers beat assembly, horns blared across 3 miles of confusion. But 3 miles is a long distance when your enemy is preparing to charge, and you are spread out like grain in a field. Here is where military logic should have prevailed. Every tactical manual, every precedent of warfare, every ounce of common sense said the same thing. Wait, let the enemy organize into proper formations, then retreat to defensible ground where numbers could not be brought to bear. Never, under any circumstances, charge a force that outnumbers you 52-1 on open ground perfect for cavalry warfare. Baldwin raised his bandaged hand at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the signal his knights had been praying for. 500 lances dropped to charging position in perfect unison. The sound of wood striking armor, of men adjusting in saddles, of horses being spurred forward, created a thunder of its own. The impossible attack had begun. But Saladin had missed one crucial detail that would doom his entire army. His forces were split by a natural feature, invisible from distance. A series of ravines cutting through the plain, hidden by tall grass and the angle of the sun. What looked like perfect open ground was actually terrain that would funnel fleeing men into death traps. Baldwin, despite his youth and failing eyesight, had recognized what Saladin's experience and arrogance had missed. The Muslim army's reaction tells us everything about their shock. Elite Mamluks, warriors who had faced Byzantine cataphracts and Nubian spearmen without flinching, simply froze. For precious seconds that felt like hours, they could not process what they were seeing. 500 men charging 26,000 was not warfare. It was not tactics. It was mass suicide, religious mania, the action of men who had lost their minds. Saladin himself, watching from his command position on a low hill, reportedly dropped his golden war mace. The clang of metal hitting stone silenced his immediate staff. An action his own chroniclers faithfully recorded, unable to hide their master's disbelief. "Madness," he whispered, then louder to his panicking officers. Form lines now." But forming battle lines takes time, discipline, and clear ground. Saladin's army had none of these, and Baldwin had given them no mercy. The Crusader charge covered 300 yards in under a minute. 500 ironclad horsemen moving like an avalanche, given steel and purpose. Their battle cry of "God wills it," drowning out Muslim commanders' desperate orders. The Templars, forming the spear point with their black and white banner streaming overhead, aimed directly for Saladin's still-forming center. 80 warrior monks who had taken vows to never retreat, never surrender, never show mercy, came on like demons from a Christian hell. At 200 yards, Muslim arrows began falling like rain. A storm of steel descended on the charging knights. Men fell, struck through gaps in armor. Horses screamed and tumbled, sending riders crashing into the hard ground. But the charge never wavered, never slowed. The fallen were simply trampled by those behind, their sacrifice buying seconds for their brothers. At 100 yards, something extraordinary happened that both Christian and Muslim sources confirm. Baldwin himself, strapped to his saddle with leather straps because his legs could no longer grip, bleeding from wounds reopened by the stress of riding, raised his sword high above his head. The gesture was impossible. His diseased hands should not have been able to grip the weapon, much less lift it. The pain must have been unimaginable. Yet every chronicle, Christian and Muslim alike, records this moment with awe. The Leper King was leading from the front. At 50 yards, Muslim horses began backing up despite their riders' desperate efforts. Animals sensed doom better than men, and doom was seconds away. The ground literally shook under thousands of hooves. Dust clouds rose like smoke from a great fire. The noise became indescribable, thunder mixed with war cries in 3 languages, the clash of weapons being readied, prayers screamed to 2 different gods by men about to meet their makers. At 2 o'clock precisely, under the scorching Levantine sun, Baldwin unleashed hell upon the earth. 2 o'clock in the afternoon struck like the hammer of God himself. The Templar wedge, 80 knights formed into a human spear, smashed into the half-formed Muslim center at full gallop. The sound was like mountains colliding, like the earth itself splitting open. A crash that men 5 miles away claimed they heard. A sound that echoed off distant hills and returned like the voice of judgment. In those first seconds, 300 Mamluks simply ceased to exist, crushed under iron-shod hooves or transfixed by 12-foot ash wood lances driven with the full momentum of charging war horses. But the real shock was not the impact, it was what followed. Instead of wheeling away after the initial charge as cavalry doctrine demanded, the Templars did the unthinkable. They kept going, driving deeper into Muslim ranks like a blade seeking a heart, like men possessed by something beyond human courage. Behind them, Baldwin's 420 secular knights struck in a second wave, exploiting the gap torn by the warrior monks, widening the wound, turning shock into catastrophe. 2:15 in the afternoon brought the first impossible moment. Saladin's center, 8,000 of Islam's finest cavalry, warriors who had conquered Egypt and humbled Syria, began to buckle. Not retreat in good order, buckle. Like a dam cracking under impossible pressure, like a wall beginning to collapse. Muslim commanders could not believe their eyes, could not process what their minds were showing them. How could 500 exhausted knights, men who should barely be able to sit their horses, be pushing back 16 times their number? Then something happened that defied all military logic and experience. The Crusader horses, exhausted from their brutal forced march, animals that should have been failing, collapsing, dying beneath their riders, instead fought like creatures possessed by divine fury. War horses bit enemy riders with teeth like daggers. They kicked with hooves that shattered bones and crushed skulls. One Templar horse, its rider already dead and hanging from the saddle, continued charging through Muslim ranks, trampling warriors, spreading panic by its very existence, as if the animal itself had taken holy vows. 2:30 in the afternoon saw panic begin its deadly, contagious work. A Mamluk regiment on Saladin's left wing, elite soldiers who had never known defeat, began edging backward as they watched the center disintegrate. In battle, hesitation spreads like plague. Within minutes, the backward drift became a stream of men seeking safer ground. The stream became a flood of warriors abandoning their positions. But then came Baldwin's master stroke, the tactical brilliance that proved his dying body housed a military mind that could see what others could not. His 3,000 infantry, hidden in dead ground behind a low ridge, suddenly appeared on the Muslim flank like an army materializing from thin air. The psychological impact was utterly devastating. To Saladin's already rattled forces, it seemed Crusader armies were spawning from the earth itself, multiplying impossibly. Shouts of "We are surrounded" spread through Muslim ranks like wildfire. Militarily, it was complete nonsense. Mathematically, the Muslims still held overwhelming numerical superiority. But panic does not calculate odds. Terror does not count banners. The impossible was happening before 26,000 disbelieving eyes. An army that had never known defeat was being routed by a force they outnumbered 52-1. 2:45 in the afternoon marked the moment when battle became massacre, when combat became slaughter, when military engagement became biblical catastrophe. As Muslim forces tried to flee the impossible nightmare unfolding around them, they discovered Baldwin's terrible tactical genius. Those ravines that had looked like natural escape routes, like paths to safety, became death traps more efficient than any human design. Knights on their towering war horses pursued, fleeing Muslims straight into these natural killing grounds, where there was no room to maneuver, no space to fight, nowhere to run. The chronicles describe horrors that still shock readers 8 centuries later. Men trampling their own brothers trying to escape, horses with broken legs screaming in agony, the sound mixing with human cries to create a symphony of suffering. Warriors throwing away swords, shields, everything that weighed them down, desperate to run faster towards safety that did not exist. The ravines became rivers of bodies, flesh piling upon flesh until the ground itself disappeared beneath the dead and dying. Then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the unthinkable happened, the moment that shattered what remained of Muslim morale. Saladin's personal guard, 2,000 elite Mamluks who had sworn blood oaths to die before abandoning their sultan, who wore their scars like holy relics and their loyalty like armor, broke. These were men who had faced Mongol cavalry on the steppes without flinching, who had stood against charging elephants in Indian campaigns, who knew no word for retreat in any language. Yet faced with Templars who fought like men already dead, like warriors who could see paradise opening before them and rushed toward it through rivers of blood, they ran. Saladin himself, watching his invincible army disintegrate like sand before wind, watching the greatest force Islam had assembled in a generation simply evaporate, made a decision that would haunt him forever and destroy his reputation for courage. Abandoning his warhorse, too slow and too heavy for desperate escape, he mounted a racing camel from the supply train. The sight of their sultan, the sword of Islam himself, fleeing the battlefield on a pack animal, on a beast used for carrying supplies, shattered the last fragments of Muslim resistance. If Saladin ran, if their legendary commander sought only survival, what hope did common soldiers have? What point was there in standing when even the mighty had fallen to fear? 3:30 in the afternoon saw pursuit become annihilation, saw warriors become butchers, saw the field of battle become an abattoir stretching for miles. Crusader knights, their blood up, their hearts pounding with battle fury and religious ecstasy, chased fleeing Muslims across the countryside. The killing was mechanical, efficient, horrible in its thoroughness. Lances broke from overuse, shattered inside bodies. Knights switched to swords, swords blunted from striking bone and armor. They used maces, warhammers, anything with weight and edge. Some Templars, every weapon lost or broken, beat enemies to death with their armored fists, with their helmets torn from their own heads, driven by something beyond rage, beyond hatred, beyond any human emotion. The very ground became slippery with blood, the earth unable to absorb the sheer volume of it. The ravines Baldwin had identified with his tactical genius became charnel houses that defied description. Muslims fell in layers like cordwood, the dead cushioning the dying suffocating under more dead who fell upon them. Some ravines literally filled with bodies to a depth of 20 feet, creating bridges of flesh and bone that desperate survivors tried to cross, slipping on their brothers' corpses, adding their own bodies to the pile when Crusader lances found them. Baldwin himself fought despite agony that defies description, that mocks any attempt to put it into words. Strapped to his saddle with leather thongs because his body could no longer control itself, unable to feel his sword hand because leprosy had stolen all sensation, he nonetheless led charge after charge into enemy formations. Knights who survived later swore sacred oaths that they saw tears of blood seeping from beneath his silver mask, his diseased body literally weeping red from the superhuman effort, his wounds opening and bleeding as his flesh tore under the strain. Yet his voice never wavered, never showed pain, calling encouragement to his men, directing the slaughter with tactical brilliance that seemed impossible from a dying teenager. The Templar Grand Master Odo of Saint-Amand provided one of the battle's most chilling moments, a story that would be told in chapter houses for generations. Finding a group of 500 Mamluks trying to rally around their fallen banner, trying to make one last stand against the madness, he led just 12 knights in a charge that shattered them completely. When asked later by astonished chroniclers how 12 men could break 500 trained warriors, he replied with words that became legend. They feared God's wrath. We embodied it. The pursuit only ended when Crusader horses finally collapsed, their mighty hearts giving out after achieving what should have been impossible, after running down fresh cavalry with bodies that should have failed hours before. Destriers that had carried armored knights for 45 miles, then charged repeatedly into massed enemy formations, simply stopped, their legs buckling, foam thick around their bits, their flanks heaving like bellows. Some died on their feet, their hearts exploding from the strain. Their riders dismounted and wept, mourning horses that had carried them to impossible victory. By 4:30 in the afternoon, the field told a story that would echo through 8 centuries of military history, that would be studied and analyzed and never fully explained. Of 26,000 warriors who had woken that morning confident of victory, certain they would be sleeping in Jerusalem's palaces within the week, fewer than 2,000 lived to see sunset. The Crusaders lost 1,100 dead, heavy losses from just 3,500 engaged, nearly 1 in 3 struck down. But nothing, absolutely nothing compared to the Islamic catastrophe. Bodies carpeted the ground for 3 miles in every direction. The ravines were choked 20 feet deep with the dead, human remains packed so tightly they had to be burned rather than buried. Abandoned weapons littered the field like an iron harvest. Saladin's supply train, enough gold and provisions to sustain 26,000 men for months of campaigning, became Crusader property. The Templars alone captured enough military equipment to outfit every Christian fortress in the Levant twice over. It was not a defeat. Defeat implies an army fought and lost. This was annihilation on a scale medieval warfare rarely witnessed, the complete destruction of a force that had seemed invincible just hours before. As the sun began to set on that blood-soaked field, painting the sky the color of the carnage below, the impossible had become reality. A dying boy with bandaged hands had shattered an empire's might, had turned back the tide of history itself through sheer force of will, faith, and tactical genius that seemed to come from beyond mortal understanding.